You're listening to Redesigning Reality with Dylan Charles and Jeff Anthony.
Anyhow, welcome to the Redesigning Reality podcast. I am Dylan Charles, speaking as always with Jeff Anthony. What's up, my brother Jeff?
Not too much. Hanging out here. It's getting cold. I guess I always comment on the weather just to inform everybody that it's getting cold.
I like to start things off with the small talk. Get the small talk out of the way. Have you noticed?
We had Halloween. Halloween was interesting, being back in the States after 10 years and seeing how crazy that's gotten.
Yeah, it's Halloween. Have you noticed that people here in the States say, "I'm sorry" for every little tiny?
Absolutely. I have noticed that.
I was at the store the other day, and I walked within some lady's sphere of 2 feet or something, passing her by, and I guess she didn't see me until I was passing, and she turned and says, "I'm sorry." All she was doing was standing there. I thought, it's okay. There's a word in Spanish they use a lot, tranquilo. I like that word. It works a lot better because you can't really say to somebody, "Oh, cool." They say, "Oh, I'm sorry I was standing here," or "I'm sorry that I was in your way," or whatever the fuck it is. There's no real good word for chill out.
Can't just look at them and say tranquil.
It's tranquil. You can't. If you say chill out, you sound like a dick. You can't just be like, "You're not sorry. You're a beautiful being of light." That comes off kind of. That doesn't work either.
Well, it's funny that you said that because that seems to happen a lot to me in public, I guess, because, using the wheelchair to walk around and stuff, or to get around, I should say, not walking in a wheelchair. That would be really interesting. But, people turn around and they see you there and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry," like you just said. And I tend to say, "You're good. It's all good.
It's all good. Tranquilo." But if you say tranquilo, they don't know what the fuck you're talking about because they don't speak Spanish typically.
Yeah.
There's lots of Mexicans in the United States and they never say they're sorry. So I can't use it on them, but whatever. It's a cultural thing. I'm sorry.
Lo siento mucho.
But language really programs our world, creates our reality. So to hear that so often, it always makes me pause and go, It really stands out to me because I've put in the time to work that kind of nonsense out of my language. There's someone in my life who I love dearly, and she always says, I'm trying. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that. How's it going? I'm trying to do that. Trying to get this done. Trying to. So you hear it when you evolve your language a little bit and become, sort of become like a participant, co-creator in what's coming out of you and what you're manifesting in this world. And you hear things from people and you're like, could the fact that you're saying I'm sorry every 30 minutes be what's fucking you up? I don't know.
That's interesting, Dylan. Very interesting point. I think we talked about this in the last podcast. I addressed the I'm sorries with the shaman, the healer I was working with.
Perhaps.
That's one of the chapter Grasshopper in my book.
Yeah, as this podcast persists and evolves and goes on and on and on, there's going to be hours and tens of hours and hundreds of hours and thousands of hours of conversation. So it's going to be tough to catalog all that in the brain. Man, I was talking to my lady a little while ago, and she was like, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm good, but I just feel like getting fucking drunk or like super high or just fucking escaping, just turning all this shit off and just fucking, building a hole to crawl in for a little bit." And she goes, "Huh, why don't you talk about that on your podcast today?"
That's funny. Let's talk about getting drunk and high.
Well, but really what we'd be talking about is we'd be talking about this penchant, this sort of, it's not even a craving, it's just this natural human desire to just sometimes be like, all right, fuck this, I'm checking out for a little bit. Escapism, there's 1,001 forms of escapism, whether it's drunk and high or whatever the fuck it is you're into, but kind of thinking about it when she said that, really reminded me of something I was thinking about a couple of weeks ago. Perhaps we even talked about this a little bit, but the challenge is of staying on the path, you know, and recognizing when you're slipping off the path, and then having that willpower, that desire to see through the, you know, short term into the long term of what it is you want to manifest, and be like, okay, cool, I'm turning this particular need, this particular desire, I'm shutting this down right now. You know, there we go. Here at Redesigning Reality podcast, we're working on saying, you know, that's what we do.
More. We don't say, you know, a lot.
You know,
we need to work, you know, into the show a little bit more. I'm sure as listeners, you totally agree with that. But I think it's interesting what you're talking about right now, because I find the same thing happens to me, to all my friends. You know, escapism is nice. It's good to get away, but the forms, it's not that the escapism itself is bad. I mean, this is what Buddhist priests and monks and, you know, all these, they're with the, you know, kung fu, karate, all these things that people are, it's all escapism. But what is your vice? Like, what's the thing that you're using to escape your ordinary reality? Obviously meditation, some form of exercise. Those are positive ways to do it, as opposed to just, you know,
trashing yourself,
going on a bender and getting hammered, you know,
trashing yourself. I think though, this need to escape, it's got to be a lot of people going through it right now, man. It seems like we're just getting hammered with bad shit happening. You know, not even really, I mean, yes, bad stuff, but just weird stuff, man. There's weird things going on right now. And I sort of feel like there's some sort of escalation in the hinterlands of consciousness. Some things, some demonic aspects of ourselves are being allowed to run wild. You remember Ghostbusters, when, you know, and the pencil dick opens up the containment center, and all the ghosts, you know, just basically leave the containment center and are free to roam the city and go nuts and cause havoc.
Right.
It's kind of the sense I get right now. There's something being unleashed. There's something being let go. And I don't really view it as a bad thing. I view it as a positive thing in the long run, because you get to kind of really see what people are capable of and really know what, you know, who the shadow is, what the shadow is doing, you know, what it's capable of. But escaping,
well, the interesting thing too, though, is that it's all across society right now. Like everywhere you turn, everything you see, there's people protesting the NFL, right? So the players are protesting against police brutality. Originally was the whole thing, and then that got somehow contorted and twisted into they're now disrespecting the flag and the military. And now people aren't watching the NFL, and people are, you know, all this devicism, you know, the division of class and race and all that is so been pushed into the forefront right now. It's really interesting. And this week, it was Dia de los Muertos is from October 31st through yesterday, actually. And it was really funny because I had brought that up in my Toastmaster meeting, because I was talking about the origins of Halloween and, you know, like Samhain from the Celtics and then Dia de los Muertos from Mexico, and how it used to be about honoring, both of those used to be about honoring the dead. And now I was making this correlation of how it's interesting now we spend time with the living, which is pretty cool, you know, if you're carving pumpkins with your kids and your family, and it's become a family. It's still a family oriented type of event. And so they were asking us all to maybe at the end of the meeting do like 2 minutes of speaking about someone that we have lost and honoring them, because I had mentioned the Dia de los Muertos, and I was talking about my grandmother who just recently passed away that we've talked about before. And the last thing I closed with was and it was just like this off the cuff thought, but it was so true. My grandparents are very wealthy, and my grandmother was a very classy lady. And I said at the end of my little spiel that the most interesting and profound thing that my grandmother taught me was that true class, never sees class. And man, it brought a tear to my eye when I said it in the meeting. I was like, I'm done. I have to finish now. But here's a Scotch-Irish white lady, from Illinois that moved to Texas at some point in her life and was she lived in Houston, surrounded by African Americans. She lived in San Antonio, surrounded by Hispanics. And she always treated everybody the same. Didn't matter that she lived in her nice, fancy neighborhood and drove her big, fancy Cadillac. She was always open and accepting of everyone. And, she always took us to the discount stores to go shopping, even though she had the money to buy whatever she wanted anywhere. And those are some really great lessons as a kid, and something that I've, continued to spread onto, push that onto my kids and treat everyone as equals. And I wish we could get further along in our society. I do see it changing, but it's a slow roll.
I think I saw a number today. I think it's 51% of the world's population is under 30 right now. Over half of the world's population is under 30. And you remember what it was like being 20, 18. You didn't know what the fuck was going on. You didn't have a clue. You were super impressionable. Your worldviews, your opinions, politics, all this sort of thing was shaped by, who you were hanging out with, basically. Who you just happened to be kicking it with. And there's a lot of that. The old school class, a lot of the old school values and stuff are just being hammered. It seems like there's some sort of cultural revolution going on. Really what I see is this. You're talking about your grandmother who just passed away, this idea of death. I mean, death is the ultimate signal of entropy, right? The universe itself, if you even believe the Big Bang, the whole concept of the Big Bang is that the universe has already expended its thrust of energy, and now it's in the decline. It's in the stages of entropy, meaning that eventually all the stars and everything are going to wink out, everything's going to go cold, and just who knows where that leaves us. But so many things seem to be in entropy. You mentioned this, the NFL thing. Think about the dynasty, the monopoly that the NFL had on the minds of the pros for so many years. I can't believe that the NFL's ratings are just taking such a dump, and that so many people are finally like, okay. We're all trained to watch. We've all been trained to watch NFL sports, this and that kind of stuff. I remember it's been 10, 15 years. I finally got bored with this. I was like, this never changes from year to year, right? And the only thing that changes is the fact that the athletes try harder and harder to stand out in stupid ways, what to me was perceived as stupid ways. But you've already had guys, you might get more yards per season or whatever, but I mean, the great things have already been accomplished. We know a guy can throw a ball down the field and a guy can catch it. Yeah, he can get we know that people can do all this stuff. Where does it evolve to? So to see like
it's just the names on the back of the jersey change. And I heard a funny thing this week too. It's a term they use in the stock market that trees can't grow to the sky. In other words, everything tops out, and the NFL had become this juggernaut, right? It had the biggest TV contracts, the most people watching it. And it was Major League Baseball before that, right? And the World Series that just happened and ended. And that has the largest growth market. More people watch this World Series than the one last year when the Cubs won the World Series. And it's because people are, they're put off, or the NFL is topped out, and they don't know how to increase the growth. And so the idiom becomes true again, that trees can't grow to the sky, and that the thing is topped out, and there was bound to be something to bring it back down, And
but it's happening. It's happening also in so many other areas, like cable subscribers, for example. They're taking, just cable companies in general are taking huge dumps right now. mainstream media, that whole paradigm is just crumbling to the ground. People's trust in politics and anything is just collapsing.
Well, the curtain's being pulled back, and
so what is that? Do
should...
you think that the curtain's being pulled back, or these things, the time has just come for these things? In other words, are people actually seeing through the curtain, or are they just like blinding themselves in other ways?
I think people... Well, here's the biggest issue is people don't remember or study history. They don't remember their past. Howard Hughes was one of the richest men in the United States. And where's Hughes? There used to be a huge company, Hughes Industrial. They made tools for all these different industries. And that's gone. Where's the, there's some giant estate mansion that you can go visit where the Hughes family lived or whatever. But all these companies, if you look back at the companies that were the biggest companies over the period of 20, 50 years, those companies are gone now, even General Motors went down the tubes and the federal government had to step in to save it. So it's all cyclical, things are going to rise and fall, and TV's time has come. People are cutting the cord. The majority of what I see is people, they watch stuff on their iPhone or their iPad. They don't want to be connected to some cable company and have to watch everything from their living room.
Yeah, I mean, as a form of escapism, TV is definitely on its decline. People keep telling me to watch this Netflix series or that Netflix. Oh, in fact, you were telling me to watch some Netflix series. Man, I just don't participate. There's so many things.
Good.
I know. There's so many good ones. Somebody was talking the other day about Black Mirror or something and saying how good it was, and I haven't seen any of these series. You were telling me about Stranger Things, and you got the whole. Oh, that's another one. Hollywood's falling apart, not just because they're, it's finally coming out that they're all pedophiles and sexual predators and all this kind of stuff,
perverts,
which we've known for a long time, but there's never been this tidal wave of revelation accusations and stuff coming out. But even
the funny part of that to me, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that prior to all the sexual side of Hollywood coming out, Hollywood's numbers, box office numbers and everything have been just totally taking a dump like everything else in the last couple of years. I mean, that whole paradigm, think about the infrastructure involved with the movie theater industry here in the United States alone, and fewer and fewer people are going,
Well, the interesting thing about that, I'm glad you kind of brought us down this avenue of investigation is you say that, but the highest grossing movies of all time have all been in the last few years, and they're all Marvel movies, and they're all about superheroes. And what does that tell you about our society? Are we looking for a hero or what? And that's the
escapism.
This new Thor, the Thor Ragnarok, that just came out today. And watch, that's going to break all the records of the last Spider-Man, because people are so hungry for a savior. They're so hungry for some kind of hero. And I'm hoping that it's going to make people look inside of themselves and find their internal hero. We always kind of gravitate towards this conversation, but it is really interesting, man, that all these movies about sex, drugs, and rock and roll are nobody's interested. But the movies about heroes and heroism and saving humanity, those are the things that people flock to right now.
I tend to take a more pessimistic take on that. It seems to me like there's not as much of an intellectual side of the, that kind of entertainment. It's gratuitous, lots of violence, lots of pretty predictable storytelling, and you know what you're going to get. You're going to get, flashy special effects and good-looking people. It's it kind of almost seems to me like the dumbing down of theater. And so to me, I tend to see it, okay, cool. Now that the superhero movies are all the highest grossing movies, well, cool. Well, we've entered a time where people don't want to think as much. They don't want to reflect. They don't want to see mirrors of themselves on screen. They don't want to see stories that make them uncomfortable about the human condition, or make them question where they're at in life, or make them challenge their understanding of the world in unique ways. They just want to tune in and they know what they're going to get. It's going to get a swashbuckling ass ride and to CG land, and we always know the good guy's going to win, right? I mean, to me,
but
like
the interesting part, though, Dylan, if you watch some of these movies, is they're a metaphor, complete metaphor for what's really going on in our world. They just glamorize and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? They glorify and glamorize some of the heroes, but then they kind of shadow and mask behind this unrealistic plot what the federal government and how people are being controlled. And that was the interesting part of the new Blade Runner movie. It was totally showing exactly how technology and the government is taking a turn towards complete domination and control over the human race.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. To me, when I see that stuff in movies, it feels to me, when I see that kind of stuff, that theme that plays out over and over again, this dystopian idea that the world's fucked and we're trending more and more towards technocratic control. When I see that, it feels more like programming, like social, cultural engineering. Like, this is an idea that we're going to reimplant in your minds over and over and over again, so that the way that you view reality considers this to be inevitable, right? Whether it's the superhero fantasy you're into, whether it's I did see Blade Runner. My wife really wanted to see it. It was a pretty kick-ass movie, I thought. And I love science fiction books. I love good sci-fi and great stories, and it really was fascinating. But it's the same dystopian idea that gets recycled over and over and over again. At the same time, though, you have this pablum-like Geostorm, a movie that just came out. It was 150 or something ridiculous $1 million production and totally flopped at the box office. But same kind of thing. They were presenting this dystopian idea that the government and the military have figured out how to control the weather, and some bad guy took control of that system, and now the bad guy's using the weather as a weapon to terrorize the planet. Right. So I don't know, maybe it speaks to what people are interested in, but this whole dystopian theme that I see coming over and over and over again in Hollywood, where's the good news? We already know good news doesn't sell, good news doesn't pay. But what is another possibility for the future of the human race other than, cataclysmic disaster turning into total authoritarian, New World Order style, 1984, George Orwell, dystopian nightmare, where some lone hero is, isolated and forced to take on the whole system by himself, and everybody else really just carries on about their business, following their little places as cogs in the wheel of this matrix, hoping for a hero to materialize somewhere. And I don't know, it's so tired, it's so played out to me. So, well, it's the Messiah. It's the Messiah. The Messiah story, right? They hope there's a Messiah complex going on. But tracking back to the Weinstein thing and all these other movie directors. I can't remember the other guy that just this week was like, they hung him out to dry too. And now it's an avalanche right now, it seems like, which is pretty fun to watch. But maybe that's what's going on. Maybe that's what's going to happen, is the people are going to get exposed. But here's my kind of insight to all of this stuff. Okay, let's hear it, Jeff. What's troubling to me is, we're exposing all of these people as perverts, as sex offenders, as what would you call it? Pedophiles, predators, sexual predators. Okay. And while I personally think it's all horrible, I have children. I have a wife who's very beautiful that I've seen people objectify right in front of me. And you have all these actresses that are coming out saying this thing happened to me or that thing happened to me, and yet they're willing to bare their breasts and their ass so that they can get a movie role and make millions of dollars. There's this really big conflict going on there. And it's really interesting to me that, a lot of these stars that are out right now, claiming to be horrified or hurt over the things that
have been done to them were at one point in their life willing to stay quiet so that they could still make millions of dollars. And when they were asked to take their clothes off for a sex scene or a nude scene, they had no issue with doing that. So it's just like the whole idea. Erin and I were talking about this. She said it's troubling to her as a woman because you still have these women out there that'll sell their bodies, and this is just another form of prostitution. You're selling skin for millions of dollars and people to like you. And then there's strip clubs and there's all this stuff. So a lot of women, I feel bad for women, because they want to be respected. They want to be equals. But then you have this huge number of women that are still willing to do whatever it takes to make a few dollars and objectify themselves. So it's a real discord there, and I don't know what the solution is, but it is something that's it's just weird. As a normal human man who's happily married, it's almost odd now to be out in public and see someone. Doesn't matter if they're attracted, because I'm always the guy who's more complimentary to women that most people wouldn't give compliments to. Erin always laughs at me. She's like, you always talk to the toll booth lady or the waitress over here. You're always so like, oh, I like your earrings or whatever. And sometimes I get these funny looks and I'm like, dude, I'm like super happily married and I'm just trying to be a nice person. Do we live in a society now where you can't even tell somebody, hey, I like your shirt, or hey, that's a cool hat?
Yeah, I mean, the evilness that we're seeing being exposed in Hollywood and whatnot, it goes so much deeper than that. If this sort of thing started to happen in regards to the political scene, Washington D.C., oh my God, man, the horrors that are no doubt taking place in that arena. I mean, you're talking about like the hugest egos in the world with the most power, the most money, that can get away with anything. I mean, literally, Washington D.C. is its own. It's not even a technically legally a part of the United States. It's its own jurisdiction. These people live there and do whatever the fuck they want. Same thing with the Vatican or whatever, and you keep hearing about all these ridiculous scandals. Ridiculous is such a nice word, but disgusting, horrifying, sex scandals, pedophile scandals coming out of the Catholic Church, and yet people still go to church. People haven't just told the Pope straight off, hey man, clean up your fucking business, or just leave us alone, right?
Good use of words there, business, because that's all it is, just a giant business.
Yeah, I mean the Vatican's a pretty wealthy, pretty gaudy institution. Have you ever been? To the Vatican? I've been there. It's impressive.
No, I've never been.
It's impressive. There's that meme on Facebook where it's like the Pope and he's whichever Pope, Benedict or whatever, but he's standing there with a draped in gold, flaked this and that, with his gold goblet, and he's in some golden throne, and he's talking about how you guys help all the poor people in the world. I'll be over here drinking out of my golden chalice, right, whatever it is.
The gilded lily.
The gilded lily. But the sexual scandal, the sexual abuse, the sexual perversion in our society is so deep now. Look at just pornography, right? It's so big. The porn industry is so big. It's unbelievable. The things that they you have this government that regulates and creates laws and makes this sort of attempt to regulate morality on society, but so many things go under the radar. Sex trafficking, it's just like it's a major multi-billion-dollar a year business in the United States. Teenage girls are being picked up. I mean, Houston, I was reading recently that Houston was a really big place where kids are being picked up, and they'll end up, pimps will just pick them up and take them to motels, a few miles away and prostitute them out, keep them as sex slaves until, I guess until they find a way out or whatever, or their parents find them somehow. But it's just there's this weird undercurrent of just totally evil perversion going on in America. So maybe it's starting to kind of, like I said, the veil's starting to peel back. But I think really what that signals to good people is that it's really challenging right now to stay focused on being a good person, doing the right things, taking care of yourself in the right ways, staying positive and staying active and staying aware and alert, because man, there's so much evil shit going on. I don't even know. Maybe the tone that I'm using today speaks to the fact that, speaks to the reason why I was saying that I was, interested in just getting slammed and checking out on this Friday night. But
well, it also speaks to the reason that you started Waking Times, was to start bringing a lot of this information into the awareness of the common man. There's too many. Just go ahead.
In doing Waking Times, wakingtimes.com, I was thinking about this last night. I had an interesting experience last night. I worked real late, and when I went and laid down, I had this sort of sense that there's an overwhelming amount of information that comes into my purview every single day. Like, the amount of information that I'm exposed to is far more than ordinary people, because I'm in the blogging sort of alternative news community, and therefore I'm literally scrolling and picking through and surfing through information all fucking day long. And so that stuff tends to weigh sort of heavily on my psyche after a while. I have to do things to get out to clear my head and clear my mind and clear my spirit out. But last night when I laid down, I was laying there thinking about all this stuff. In my mind, I went to this really strange kind of almost flashback. My mind went back to a bunch of experiences I had when I was a child, when I was in the 3 to 4 to 5-year-old, probably a 5-year-old max range. I was just like reliving all these experiences in my mind of like going to the certain pizzerias or going to the park or the classroom, my first kindergarten classroom. And I was like looking at kids and knowing their names and seeing their names and remember them, like, oh, there's Sam, there's Julie, and this really weird experience. And when I woke up in the morning, it wasn't a dream, it was before dream state. But when I woke up in the morning, I had this really strange sense that I was really still connected to my past in a way that's easily forgotten. Have you ever had experiences like that where it's almost like spontaneous recall of your past?
Absolutely have. I've woken up and had these same thing you're talking about. It's like you're dreaming, but it feels so real. And all of a sudden, these people that you went to elementary school and middle school with are thrust into your memory. And they're in the forefront of all your thoughts when you wake up in the morning. And they're people that you haven't thought about in 30 years,
right.
At our age now. I mean, we're in our 40s. So it can be people from 30 years ago. And you can sit there and it's almost like you have this class photo, right? Kai just got his class photos back the other day. And looking at his class photo, man, that was a whirlwind of memories. It reminded me of being in Miss McAnally's, kindergarten class and laying out the mats to take your nap after lunch and all this stuff, and I could picture all these little faces in all their little 70s clothes in my class photo, right? I even remember the guy with the, back then it was the old school giant camera, like a Hasselblad, and him saying, "Say whiskey." And I always laugh now, like, yeah, they're not telling little kids to say whiskey. You probably wouldn't be invited back to take any photos, but it was always say tequila, say whiskey, and because it make you laugh as a little kid. And anyway, I totally have had those experiences like you're talking about. And I believe, as many shamans believe, that you do have access to your past. These are, I often refer to it to people as there is no past, present, or future. There's just an accumulation of now moments, and you can access these different moments. And it's really awesome because you can go back and you can, through this now moment, you can access a now moment from what we'll call past, and you can make adjustments, and you can bring those adjustments from your perceived past into your present. And then you can also project those into your future. And, it's not true when people say you can't change the past, because you can absolutely change the past by changing your perception of the past. And that's something that people don't know about enough, and they don't research that enough and try to access that.
Man, you're talking about something that's unbelievably fascinating to me. I know we talk about plant medicines a lot on this program. They've had a pretty profound impact on me in recent years. But iboga, the African shamanic plant medicine, that's like the main thing that happens in the journey, right? So people show up to ceremony carrying emotional baggage, trauma, PTSD, depression, whatever. And when they embark on this spiritual journey with this medicine, I mean, that's what happens. You go into a place inside your mind with your eyes closed, and you can literally go back into any moment of your past and relive it. And I know because I've done this a number of times. It's fucking amazing, man. Like you'll go back. Just the first time I ever experienced this, a very strong dose. It started to hit me. I was laying there listening to this crazy Bweezy music and stuff. And then the next thing you know, like a movie screen opens up in front of my face, and I saw a baby in a womb, and amniotic fluids and umbilical cord and everything kind of surfing around in this womb. And I looked at the baby, and then I realized, holy shit, that's me. And then whoosh, I was born and life began. And I spent, 12 hours literally reliving those first few years of my childhood. I was back in the house where my parents got divorced when I was very young, but when they were together when I was a baby up to like 1-2 years old, I was back in the house. And so I was able to unlock the trauma and the pain. I was able to re-understand what had actually happened to me, because as a baby, you don't know what's fucking going on. And so I was in a household where there was a lot of yelling, a lot of fighting, a lot of bickering and stuff that ultimately led to a divorce. So a lot of heartache and stress and this sort of stuff. And as an adult now, none of that stuff is a big deal. But as a kid, it was a huge deal because I didn't understand. I didn't understand interpersonal relationships or marriages or money stress or anything like that. And so I was able to go back, sort of watch myself as a kid over my own shoulder as me today, and see all the same events. I could sense how I took them in at the time. I could feel them the same way, but with the understanding that I have today that, okay, this is just something that happened in my past. It's not me today. I have a lot more knowledge and understanding about life, and I can restructure these memories in a way to where they're no longer traumatic. And so people, when they show up to these ceremonies, like I've seen soldiers and people who have suffered sexual abuse, people, soldiers who've been in combat and this sort of thing, they can go back in those experiences and see them from the survivor's perspective. And it's really powerful. But you can also do that without the help of this shamanic medicine. And the shaman we work with, and he tells us that once you've had these journeys, once you've seen all this, you realize that you don't actually need the medicine to do this. You can do this on your own. The powers of human consciousness are far-reaching, and they can do so much more than we really truly give them credit for. But once your perception of what's possible is expanded so far, then yeah, I can lay down after work one night and be like, wow, I just had sort of a flashback about my childhood. Let me go back in there a little bit further. What else do I remember? And I went through this whole series of memories, man. It was fucking amazing.
That's something that you and I have talked about before. I don't think on the show, just in conversation, was I remember telling you that I was going through this period when I first moved back here where I would start to doze off and I was having this dream, and I would wake up because, you wake up, your shoulder, neck, whatever is stiff, and it'd be this awesome dream. And you're not quite cognizant and awake enough to forget yet. And I would think to myself, I want to jump back into that dream. That was so fun and enjoyable. And I was really enjoying exploring this phase or aspect of my life. And, all of a sudden I'm back in that dream. I'm back in the same dream. It's almost like you're this dream weaver, right? And you're taking all these little pieces of stuff. And by the end of the night, or in the morning when you wake up, you can have some really exhilarating conclusions, that can allow you to make change moving forward in your life. And I guess I'm kind of stumbling over. What's it called? I'm having trouble thinking of it.
I don't know. You're talking about lucid
when you're
dreaming.
Controlling your dream. Lucid, yes, thank you. Lucid dreaming, and that's plays directly into. I was thinking of that because of what you were saying about you don't need iboga, you don't need ayahuasca, you don't need psilocybin to do all these things. The powers of the mind and where it goes in the subconscious when you're not actively thinking about things is really amazing. And I find that through shamanic drumming, journey or through meditation, the more you do that, the more lucid your dreams become. I don't know. Have you had that experience too?
I've never actually had what I would consider a lucid dream, and maybe I have, but I'm comparing it to the experiences I've heard from other friends I know who are just somehow have this natural inherent capacity to lucid dream, whenever they want. It seems like the people that I know who find this really common in their lives sort of started as children. They just had this capacity to wake up in their dreams and control the environments, and it's not something I could say that I've ever directly experienced, but there is a correlation between it for me. Speaking for myself, there is a correlation for how I treat myself, what I put into my body and my mind, and what practices I'm doing to the quality and the clarity of my dreams in general. I know it's pretty common even for people who smoke pot heavily. When they stop smoking pot, like their dreams basically turn back on. I think that cannabis is powerful and wonderful. It is in so many ways, but it has a tendency to stop the dreaming process, interrupt the dreaming process somehow. But the point was that the more intention that I put into my own consciousness, what's happening in my own psyche, the more awareness that I focus on, that I generate, the more interesting dreams get. And I find a lot of times I'll have crazy dreams, wake up in the middle of the night, go right back into dreaming, wake up, and I'll go through these phases once in a while. So it's not like a regular thing, but last night was something different. I was still conscious. It was well before I went to sleep, and it was almost like I was going through and selecting memories to relive. And this actually reminds me of visualization. Like Nikola Tesla, brilliant scientific genius, right? Sort of a madman of science. A lot of his inventions, a lot of his ideas came from visualization in a conscious state, not dream visualization, but he would sit in a conscious state and meditate, and he would see his designs, he would see his ideas unfold in vivid, extreme detail, like schemes for Faraday cages or whatever, the coils and the stuff that he constructed. He would see those in his mind's eye. His third eye, if you will. Like he would close his eyes and meditate and see these designs appear in front of him in extreme detail. So he could open his eyes in and write down plans, down to the wire of what he saw in his mind. And he knew before he even built them that they worked, right? So that's some power that we have in our consciousness. I remember when I was first starting to explore this a little bit, I was trying different methods of meditation. And one of them that I was always interested in was the Silva method. I think it's Jose Silva. It's used to be more common. One of the original, he was a guy from like El Paso, Texas or something, who built sort of an empire about training people how to use their minds, and sort of a precursor to the meditation boom we've seen. But when I did some of his basic practices, it was, wake up in the morning when you're first in that still sort of like drifting into consciousness in the real alpha state. Lay down, close your eyes, and visualize. Concentrate on creating the picture of something simple like a piece of fruit, a banana or an orange or something. And so in that, you're in essence training your brain's ability to visualize, which I think is basically training your third eye how to work. So I don't know if you've ever had like a true, what you felt like was a third eye opening experience. Have you?
Yes, I have.
Are you talking about something with medicines or?
No, with no medicine whatsoever.
What was that about?
And that's in another chapter of my book. And I'll get to that right now. But I was going to say, based on the dream thing, and you started talking about Nikola Tesla, it reminds me of Benjamin Franklin, right? Same kind of thing, same era even. A little before Tesla, but he was saying that he often would fall asleep with his pocket watch in his hand, and his pocket watch was on a chain that was connected to his vest, right? And the reason he would do that is because he would be thinking about a problem that he was trying to solve, and he knew that if he fell asleep in the middle of the day, right, he'd be working on these problems and jotting down his ideas in his little journal. And he would lean back in his chair to take this little cat nap. And as he would fall asleep, the watch would fall out of his hand. And when it would tug on his jacket or his vest, it would wake him up. And he talked about how these would be these moments of inspiration where he would solve these problems that he'd been working on as he entered into the dream state. So it's really interesting, the alpha, delta, zeta, all those different phases you go through. So, but as far as like a third eye opening experience, I remember I was going to see a healer. His name is Eugene, and he's in Costa Rica, and he does the Shin energy work, the specific human energy nexus, right? Shin, S-H-E-N. And I had told him that I had been working on these meditations for opening your third eye. And what happened was he said, hey, yeah, we can work on that. And so what happened in the first session with him was I started to see this in my mind's eye right here. I started to see this. It looked like a spider on a web. It looked like light coming through this web, and it looked like a spider crawling on it. And after the session, he asked me, what did you see? And I told him what I saw, what I just described. And so fast forward, we go for session number 2. Hey, I want to work on this third eye opening. Okay, cool. And this time I see this flutter, and in my mind's eye, I see this flutter and more light comes in, and it looks like there's something moving over the top of this light. And so I described that to him again, and it was on the third session, which was really interesting. That's the one I was talking about in another podcast where the snake rose up out of my stomach, and then he pushed it out of my temple, and the little wisp of smoke came out of my temple. And it was on that instance that this flutter got really big, and this light, and all of a sudden it just went pop, and it opened. And I looked, and it was what that flutter was, what that webbing looking stuff was eyelashes, and it was an eye that opened. And as I looked into the eye, I noticed that it was my eye. It was this green, shaped exactly like my eye that I look at every morning in the mirror eye. And I told Eugene, I was like, it was really weird, dude, because the thing that I thought was a spider and I thought was a web, those were my eyelashes that were stuck. My third eye, I guess I would say, was stuck closed. And now, I feel like it's opened. And the most interesting part of it was when I looked at this eye, it was an eye that opened. And when I looked at the eye, it was my eye. And he started laughing. And he looked at me and he's like, well, whose eye did you think it was going to be, Jeff? And it was really funny. And to give you an idea of the things that have happened since then, it's after that I started doing intuitive healing work with people and counseling. And that's when orbs and all these other than normal reality things started showing up during my counseling. It's when I started saying things to my clients that they couldn't understand how I knew what was going on with them, or how I had information.
Some sort of psychic awakening.
Absolutely.
Some sort of latent psychic powers being awoken.
And it's still, it's never stopped. It happens still to this day. It just happened like a month ago with my neighbor. Just out of the blue, she asked me a question, and I answered her question, and then I asked her a question about why she asked me that, and she said, I don't know. And I said, I think you asked me this because of this. And she started bawling and crying and was like, how can you know that? And it's all happened since that third eye opening. So it's definitely something that's real. It's definitely something that we all have. And I believe it's a window into seeing the unseen,
Well, like the scientific correlation to that experience, like the mind's eye being able to perceive and see things with the eyes closed, that they link that back to the pineal gland. And 4, 5, 6 years ago, that was such a huge topic on the internet. Everybody wanted to know about the pineal gland, wanted to know about, the relationship to like ancient spiritual practices and even Catholicism and stuff, where they talk about this pine cone shaped little tiny gland right in the center of the 2 hemispheres of the brain that is responsible, the seat of the soul. I think Rene Descartes called it that. They sort of had had boiled all this down to this one little gland in the body that was basically acting like an eyeball. And then when they looked at it even more closely, they found similarities in its structure to the rods and cones of the actual eyeball. And so a lot of people look at this kind of stuff and they say, oh, that's woo-woo, garbage, nonsense. But even something as practical as the Silva method, what it's doing, it's teaching you how to, with practice and repetition, actually awaken this gland, this feature that's embedded in your mind. Part of the story is that as you grow older, the gland naturally calcifies, right? And then if you compound that calcification process with things like exposure to water fluoridation or other toxic chemicals or antidepressants or this sort of thing, it calcifies faster. It's something you could totally live without, but your ability to expand your awareness within inside your own being diminishes as you age. And so back to iboga again, because this is all so relevant to iboga. When you take iboga, when you lay down or when you start journeying, your guide, your shaman, your guide will come over. At least the way that we conduct ceremonies, we'll come over and we'll when this person's laying down, we'll put a paste. It's called the Pygmy Pace. It's made with like 100-something different herbs from the jungle in Africa on their third eye. Let it sink in. Start tapping on their eye right here. And you see all this in ancient artwork too. All these Hindu designs and everything where there's Shiva and all this or whoever that's got two eyes and one eye right in the middle there. So it's something that we've known for a long time. But in iboga ceremonies, the guide will come over and start tapping, and he'll be like, "Okay, tell me when you see my finger." And the eyes are closed. There's a blindfold over your eyes. Tell me when you see my finger. And if they don't see your finger, you're like, cool, we'll wait a little bit, maybe have some more medicine and come back. But typically when they begin that process of tapping on the third eye with the Pygmy Pace, the person says, oh, holy shit, I can see your finger. I can actually visually see your finger. And my eyes are closed. And then their vision expands beyond their being to include the room and the space. And ultimately, as the process of awakening with this medicine unfolds, they end up seeing the entire universe within their mind's eye. It's fucking fascinating. But you can do this at home. I was teaching my 9-year-old son, working with him on some daily meditations and teaching him this simple meditation I learned a long time ago. Maybe it's not even a meditation. It's a mental exercise. Imagine, close your eyes and imagine a lemon. Look at a lemon, see a lemon. How big is the lemon? What is the quality and the texture of the skin? What shape is this lemon? Now slice the lemon. Can you smell the lemon? Can you, concentrate on what a lemon, the citrus smell to be like? And ultimately what happens is your saliva glands get fired.
You know what, dude? You saw me, I had my eyes closed. I was doing the exercise as you were saying it, and as soon as you said slice the lemon, I started salivating in my mouth. That's so awesome, man.
It's fascinating, right? Like you can trigger the salivation process just by imagining and thinking about an experience that you've had before. You've already experienced the lemon. It's there in your brain, right? So if you can go through and you can sort of like hack your understanding of what's possible in these little tiny ways, what can happen and how can your life change if you really, really apply yourself? And I see like a huge movement right now, like total human optimization kind of movement going on. There's two parts to it. There's the technological part of it where people are, using technology. Ultimately, there's the AI and the singularity, the blending of technology and human beings. There's that part of it. But even closer to home than that, just using technology to understand more closely how the body's endocrine system works and how you can measure, anything from oxygen levels to whatever to measure like your ketogenic state. There's so many ways that we're using science and technology to measure and understand these little finer details of how the body works. But in the quest for human optimization, but there's so much of that going on. But it really, you can cover great ground just by practicing this simple art of visualization, and if you go back to it and you look at like the art of success and people like Carnegie and all of these people, they tend to say very much the same things. And one of those things that you hear all the time is that they don't allow their minds to entertain the possibility of failure. And that's part of it. But the other part of it is they actively visualize, they actively practice seeing themselves in successful positions, accomplishing great things, doing the things that they want to achieve. They actually see this happening. And so that's just like what you were saying. It's like creating a lucid dream for yourself. You're going in there and picking a part of your life and changing it within your mind, and then coming back to the quote unquote real world and putting that into action. And it just seems to be able to manifest because of the process of creating it in the mind first,
Yeah, I've talked frequently about changing your mind and how, these two places, these two states are connected. This dream state or imaginary state, and then this reality state that we all perceive as the real, and it's not the real. A lot of times all the time we're creating this reality. This is all just something that we've all agreed upon to experience. And the more our knowledge grows, the more these things manifest into our world, right? It's why technology is always, I can't remember it's something ridiculous now, but like the speed of processing information that computers, it used to be I read this thing because, Aaron works in tech, and it was like every 7 years, and then it was every 4 years, and then it was every 2 years, and then now it's like every 8 months, and then it's going to be every 2 weeks. And then that's the singularity thing you're talking about, where the amount of time it takes to double the processing speed and capacity of computers is getting shorter and shorter and shorter until it'll be instantaneous. And then where do we go from there? And the thing that I find interesting about that is, as someone who's worked so hard to grow their consciousness and open their third eye and work on meditation and shamanism and journeying, the idea of augmenting my reality or my abilities through technology is horrifying to me, because I realize that you can get there the old school way. You can take the path of the shaman, right? And you can train your mind and you can train your reality. That's an interesting thought, right? Train your reality. Then all of a sudden you become this grand manifester, right? All the things that that word I think is overused, manifester. I call it altering your reality.
Co-creator, something.
Well, because to realize something means to bring into reality. That's what a realization is. It literally means to bring something into reality. So you're not really manifesting anything. You're making a realization. You're making something that was a thought become a thing. And that's the biggest and most damaging thing that a lot of people do in their lives, is they don't realize that their thoughts become things, and then all their negativity plays out in front of them. Like we've talked before, your personality becomes your personal reality. It's an interesting play on words, but it's also an interesting thing that literally happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we have enough information yet to decide whether or not to compare the possibilities with what we understand is possible with pure consciousness, organic consciousness, to what's going to happen when the singularity comes. And I keep hearing estimates where the singularity is coming closer and closer. And that's the singularity is basically that moment where, man and machine becomes combined, and, the consciousness is joined as one. This shit creeps me out, bro. I mean,
but it's already happening in some test lab in the military, and they're already doing it.
I saw a meme the other day that caught my eye, because we live in the world of memes now. It's basically an idea condensed, or a quote or something condensed, that gets splashed in front of your face through technology that, has the power to just, change or slightly update or just shift your awareness or perception. It's make you laugh or whatever. I saw one that was like, had some sort of like cosmic picture of some shamaness or something, but it was, I don't remember the quote exactly, but it spoke to the idea that once you understand and have experienced the fact that alternate, there's more depth and possibility to reality than what we typically see. Once you understand and get and have experienced the reality that there's other dimensions, once you've been through that in one regard or another, then it's you really never look at death the same way. You don't look at fear the same way. You don't look at adversity the same way. You don't even look at other human beings. You don't look at life, or you don't look at your connectedness. You start to look at things in a more connected way. And that's, man, I saw that and I was like, man, that's so true for me with some of the experiences I've had that have just blown through my understanding of what's possible. But just by sitting in closed eye meditation or doing, Qigong meditations, working on the energy body, doing ayahuasca or iboga or psilocybin, these things, once you really push through your base level understanding of what reality is, man, it's really exciting. You really kind of start to wonder what is after death. There was a study that just came out last week, because of course we're always exploring this in science and psychology, but I forgot what the premise of the study was, but the idea was that we found some way to test and confirm that consciousness or the mind is actually active up to X amount of time till after death technically occurs. That's all exciting big news, because you're saying, oh, okay, well, science is catching up to the idea that the mind and consciousness goes through a different type of transition than the physical body. We don't, the physical body shrivels up, turns to dust, right? But what happens to the mind and consciousness? I think it goes back to its cosmic home. I don't know. What do you think?
My response to that would be, Morpheus, are you telling me I can dodge bullets?
Hey, when you're ready, you won't have to.
There you go. Thank you, Dylan. Yeah. Thank you for catching on to that. But my retort to that would be that I believe in the shamanic belief that your consciousness doesn't ever completely come into this body anyway. So it's not like it's going to go back somewhere. It actually remains in the ether. It actually remains there. And I believe, in my personal experiences, that that's what you're doing when you're using your third eye and you're manifesting other than ordinary reality, when you're accessing these things and these abilities to heal yourself, to heal others, to counsel, to facilitate. You're accessing your, for lack of a better word, the word that people understand is higher self. And that's a piece of your consciousness and your awareness that is outside of you. And so in my understanding of it, it's, let's say, like, the human body can only, as a vessel, and it can only hold so much of your essence, of your consciousness. And let's call it 13%, right? 15%. And the rest of it is spread out through other realities even, right? And now we're supposed to be wrapping up, and I'm opening like a huge can of worms here.
That's a big fucking can of worms, yeah.
It's huge. So, but the whole idea is that all of these different realities are accessible, and that's where a lot of shamanic healing comes from. It's learning how to access other dimensions where you have another life going on, and bringing these parts of yourself into this dimension through your awareness and through your consciousness and the essence of who you are and how powerful we all are. So now we have a topic for our next.
That's a big one, a fun one though. I think just real quick and based on personal experiences that I've had, I really like this sort of idea, the theory that the human body acts as a sort of specific receiver of consciousness. So up above the individual human being, there is like this layer of cosmic consciousness that sort of permeates all things. That helps to explain why, when people move through the light or have near-death experiences, they start to be able to understand the thoughts of other people and whatnot. And but that your mind and your body acts as a receiver, so it's picking up a very narrow bandwidth of the total possibility of conscious information that's being pushed out into the universe. And so,
well, hang on. Let me tap into that one for 1 sec.
Wow. Okay, man. Tap into it.
People often say, I want to become more conscious. And my response to that would be, you can't become more conscious than you're not unconscious right now. You and I we're conscious. Okay. That's the definition, is we're awake, we're breathing, we're cognizant. But what you can do is you can grow your awareness. Because to me, consciousness is like what you're talking about. There's this field of consciousness. It's something that I can't believe our science doesn't investigate, like, strong force, weak forces, gravity, all of these things we study.
It does. Certain people do, yeah.
Right. But consciousness is what holds all of this together. And what people, I think, are talking about when they say they want to become more conscious is actually they want to become more aware of this thing called consciousness. And the more aware you are of consciousness, the more you can access all these different avenues and, bring these things together and into your awareness. So anyway, that was my little
personal awakening, which is, an idea that whose time has come. Personal awakening. People need to wake the fuck up. We know this. But personal awakening really is that process of the expansion of the self, right? Which is what you're saying, the expansion of the awareness of who you are and your role and all these big things. Man, that does give us a lot of cool stuff to talk about for the next show. We're running over our allotted time here. But, it's redesigning reality. We're laid back dudes. We don't really we never script this. We never even, we don't even really prepare. We just hit record and see what happens. But we'll pick this up in another conversation. You got anything else you want to throw out the good people out there, Mr. Jeff?
Well, as always, go check out wakingtimes.com.
Boom.
And I'm the author of Cosmic Wizard, A Journey from Outer Rage to Inner Sage. You can connect with me on my website, journeytoinnersage.com. And, little personal plug, my book's available on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. It's a good book.
All that good stuff.
Check it out. Cosmic Wizard on Amazon, redesigningsreality.com, YouTube, all that good stuff. I'm Dylan Charles with Jeff Anthony, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Peace.
You've been listening to Redesigning Reality with Jeff Anthony and Dylan Charles.
Mokaboni,